Jax Verad was having one hell of a day, which, given that he'd spent it being dragged by two slug-like guards across the polished floor of the Overlord's council chamber, was saying something. The guards were as charming as a wet sock and smelled worse. "Hey, fellas," Jax quipped, trying to ignore the slime trail they left. "Think you could go a little easier on the grip? I've got an arm wrestling tournament next week." They didn't respond, just a widening of their eye stalks that probably counted as deep contemplation in their species, the Boglaxians. The Boglaxians were known for their strength, not their sense of humor. Or hygiene. "Guess not," Jax muttered to himself, struggling to maintain some semblance of dignity while being hauled before the council. The arena's council chamber was a vast, echoing hall of polished steel and intimidating alien architecture. The floor was an unsettling shade of black that seemed to absorb light and hope in equal measure. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat Overlord Zintha in his throne-like chair, looking like he was halfway between a crocodile and a corporate lawyer. Zintha was the kind of guy who banned joy for the hell of it, and recently, sarcasm. "Ah, Jax Verad," Zintha's voice boomed, dripping with false cordiality. "Our human representative." Jax gave a mock salute, accompanied by his trademark smirk. "Present and somewhat accounted for, your overlordship." Zintha's eyes narrowed, which seemed like a challenging task given the natural squint. "Your reputation precedes you," he continued, leaning forward. "But I must remind you that the use of sarcasm is strictly prohibited in this council. It undermines our authority." Jax shrugged. "Undermining your authority? Well, wouldn't want to do that." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that implied Jax was one word away from becoming intimately acquainted with the council's disciplinary measures. Behind Zintha, an assortment of alien representatives exchanged glances that ranged from curiosity to outright disdain. Jax could feel the weight of their collective gaze, like being scrutinized by a cosmic jury. "You humans have a peculiar way of communicating," Zintha mused, his tone somewhere between bemusement and malicious intent. "Your sarcasm is a weapon, one we're not keen to let you wield." "Where would we be without our weapons, though?" Jax replied, feigning innocence. He could almost hear the collective groan from the humans back on Earth. Zintha's smile was a predatory crescent. "We have invited you here to discuss your future in our arena. As you know, the Galactic Games are a test of survival and skill among various species. So far, you humans have been entertaining, if not entirely competent." "Competent? You flatter us," Jax said, rolling his eyes in a way that required no translation. "In light of your people's penchant for sarcasm," Zintha continued, ignoring Jax's interjection, "I propose a compromise. You may retain your participation in the games, provided you adhere to our communication standards." "So no sarcasm," Jax reiterated. "And if I slip up, you will be penalized," Zintha replied, his voice oily and unyielding. "Heavily, of course," Jax retorted. "Wouldn't want to be penalized lightly." The council's tension was as palpable as the Boglaxian's body odor. Even Jax, usually as nonchalant as a cat in a sunbeam, was beginning to feel the pressure. But he couldn't help himself. Sarcasm was as natural to him as breathing. Being deprived of it was like asking a fish to survive on land. Jax was about to push his luck, and likely his lifetime, further when a chime signaled the end of the session. "Council adjourned," Zintha declared, dismissing the assembly with a wave. "Jax Verad, think on your position. We'll expect a more compliant attitude next time." "Can't wait," Jax replied, flashing a smile with more teeth than warmth. As the guards began leading him out, he muttered under his breath, "What a delightful bunch of space raccoons." Once outside the chamber's oppressive atmosphere, Jax took a deep breath, the air still tinged with the metallic tang of interstellar bureaucracy. He hoped none of it was toxic, though he had his doubts. Around him, the bustling corridors of the Galactic Games HQ were alive with representatives from species across the galaxy, each more bizarre than the last. It was like wandering through a bizarre zoo where every exhibit was armed and somewhat dangerous. He wasn't alone for long. A familiar figure sidled up beside him, Lena Corvus, fellow human and one of the few people Jax trusted not to stab him in the back, at least not without warning first. "That went well," Lena said, her voice laced with dry amusement. Her hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid, and her uniform was as crisp as her tongue. "About as well as a cactus in a balloon factory," Jax replied, rubbing his sore wrists. "Zintha's got it in for us. It's a talent of yours, making friends wherever you go," Lena quipped, matching his stride. "What's the plan?" "Plan? You mean aside from not getting vaporized by the sarcasm police?" "Yes, aside from that," Lena said, rolling her eyes. "We need to figure out how to keep our edge in the games without pissing off the council." "Easy, we win," Lena snorted. "And if we don't, we make it so damn entertaining they forget why they're mad," Jax said with a grin. We're humans, Lena. We're the underdogs, the wild cards. Nobody expects us to play by the rules, not even us. Lena shook her head, but Jax could see the hint of a smile. You're impossible, and that's why you love me, Jax said, his tone light but sincere. They continued through the corridors, plotting their next moves with the reckless abandon of those who had little to lose. As they passed a viewport, the vast, indifferent expanse of space stretched out beyond, a reminder of just how small and insignificant they were in the grand scheme of things. But if life had taught Jax anything, it was that even the smallest players could change the game, provided they were loud, clever, and utterly unrepentant. And if they could do it with a smirk and a wink, all the better. Jax and Lena reached the human quarters, a series of cramped, utilitarian rooms that made even the worst Earth apartments look palatial. Not that Jax was complaining. He'd slept in worse places, like a Loxian jail cell or on a planet where the bugs were the size of dogs and twice as hungry. Home sweet hovel, Jax said, flopping onto a narrow cot that creaked ominously under his weight. At least we have a view, Lena remarked, nodding to the small porthole that looked out into the void. Yeah, a view of our impending doom, Jax replied. But hey, at least it'll be a spectacular light show. Lena chuckled, sitting across from him. So what's the real plan, Jax? Jax leaned back, staring at the ceiling, which was a shade of grey only slightly more cheerful than a storm cloud. We do what humans do best, adapt, survive, and annoy the hell out of everyone else while doing it. And if Zintha tries to make good on his threats, then we give him a reason to regret underestimating us, Jax said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We've got a few tricks up our sleeves, and not all of them involve sarcasm. As they plotted and bantered, the universe outside continued its indifference, stars winking out one by one as the spaceship moved through the interstellar night. Yet within their small corner of the cosmos, Jax Verid and Lena Corvus knew they were about to make a noise that would echo far beyond their humble beginnings. Because that's what humans did best. They were stubborn, irreverent, and relentlessly clever. And if nothing else, they were going to make sure the galaxy knew it. Even if it killed them. So, Jax said, breaking the comfortable silence, how about a drink to celebrate our inevitable doom? Lena grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. I thought you'd never ask. Together, they raised imaginary glasses to the stars, to sarcasm, and to the unyielding spirit of humanity, a toast to the underdogs who refused to be tamed. Jax Verid had always thought that if there was one universal constant, it was that humanity would find a way to screw things up with style. This time, though, it seemed the style had been forcibly replaced with a stiff suit of compliance. The ban on sarcasm, a cruel twist by Overlord Zintha, was already showing cracks in the human team's morale like ice on a summer pond. Which, Jax mused, was about as stable as things got around here. Back in the human quarters, Jax and Lena convened with the rest of their crew, a ragtag bunch of experts who specialized in surviving the gauntlet of cosmic absurdities known as the Galactic Games. The room was cramped, but they'd managed to squeeze in a table, some chairs, and the faint hope that they could collectively outwit the universe. Sitting across from Jax, Sarah Lathra, the quick-witted analyst, was tapping away on her datapad like she was storming the gates of some digital fortress. Her eyes flicked up, always sharp and a bit too knowing. So, she began, voice as dry as the Martian dunes, how's our favorite outlaw of irony? Feeling like a comedian at a funeral, Jax replied, slouching in his chair. And not the fun kind of funeral where someone spikes the punch. Quill Thorne, their pragmatic engineer, let out a snort from where he was perched on a chair that looked ready to give up on life. He was a mountain of a man with hands like spanners and a mind like a blueprint. I told you, sarcasm's a liability, he grumbled. You can't fix a broken hyperdrive with a witty remark. Maybe not, Lena interjected, but it might make the explosion more entertaining. Jax grinned, though the mood in the room was decidedly less buoyant than his usual bravado. Look, Quill, we're not exactly working with the Galactic Council's blessing here. We're underdogs, remember, scrappy, unpredictable, and really good at pissing people off. Underdogs who can't use their best weapon, Sarah pointed out, leaning back. Zintha's ruling is going to handicap us in the games. Our strategies rely on being unpredictable, bending the rules, and yes, sarcasm. The sarcasm band's a nest of buzzsaws, Quill added, crossing his arms. It's designed to make us stumble. Jax nodded, rubbing a hand over his stubbly chin. True, but what's life without a little adversity? Miserably peaceful, that's what. The room descended into a thoughtful silence, each member of their motley crew chewing over the implications. The Galactic Games were ruthless, full of traps and trials that made gladiatorial combat look like a friendly picnic. Human adaptability and wit had been their edge, and now the universe seemed to be doubling down on removing it. We need a new angle, Lena said finally. If we can't quip our way to victory, we need to outsmart them another way. Maybe we just play it straight, Quill suggested, his voice heavy with skepticism. Follow the rules for once. The collective groan that followed was almost musical in its rejection. Sure, let's also try hugging a black hole while we're at it, Jax said. It's like the universe handed us a puzzle where all the pieces are the same shade of, we're screwed. Don't worry, Sarah said, her fingers already dancing over her datapad again. I'll come up with something. I have a few ideas that might just work, assuming the laws of physics don't suddenly change just to spite us. Wouldn't put it past them, Lena muttered. As they thrashed out plans, Jax couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The games had always been about survival and spectacle, but this time the stakes were personal. Humanity wasn't just fighting for pride or glory, they were fighting to be heard, to prove that they couldn't be silenced by a heavier hand or a thicker skull. All right, Jax said, standing up to address the team with a flourish that only half masked his uncertainty. Plan's simple. We play the game, follow the rules just enough to keep our heads on, and when the time's right, we bend them so hard they snap. You realize that sounds like a recipe for disaster, Quill pointed out, but there was a spark of something akin to admiration in his eyes. Disaster's our specialty, Lena shot back, and for a moment, their laughter chased away the shadows of doubt. As the meeting wound down, the team dispersing to their stations to prepare, Jax lingered, staring out that small porthole at the indifferent stars. Each one was a pinprick of light in a void that didn't care if they succeeded or failed. But damn it all if he wasn't going to make sure the galaxy remembered the humans, one way or another. The next day started with a holographic briefing that was about as exciting as watching space dust settle. The games were set to begin soon, and the council had laid out the first challenge, a strategic puzzle run that required wits, speed, and the ability to decipher alien logic. It was the sort of task that had human ingenuity needed, written all over it, but now it came with a side of no sarcasm allowed. Jax stood in front of his team, a holographic map floating between them, and tried to look confident. All right, people, you've seen the challenge. It's like a game of chess, but the pieces are trying to kill us and the board's on fire. Sarah was already deep in analysis mode, her eyes darting as she absorbed the information. The key will be to anticipate the alien logic patterns, she said, her tone the kind of calm that suggested she might just pull a rabbit out of her hat. Or at least a decent plan. Alien logic, Quill grunted, scratching his head. Just what we need, a riddle wrapped in a trap wrapped in a cosmic middle finger. More or less, Jax agreed. But we've faced worse. Remember the time we got dropped into that lab maze on Titan? We got through that, didn't we? Yeah, Lena said, smirking, and you nearly lost an arm to a malfunctioning cleaning drone. Details, Jax replied with a dismissive wave. The point is, we've got brains, guts, and a total disregard for the odds. The team spent the next few hours brainstorming strategies, bouncing ideas around with the kind of reckless creativity that had gotten them this far. Jax could see the spark returning to his crew, the fire of resilience that sarcasm alone had never truly defined. They were fighters, every one of them, and they weren't about to let a little thing like oppressive alien rules get in their way. All right, Jax said, wrapping things up, I want everyone ready. We'll hit the ground running and make sure that when we break out of this puzzle, they have no choice but to admit we belong here. Or at least that we're too stubborn to leave, Sarah added with a wry smile. Either way works. Jax grinned, feeling the familiar thrill of the challenge ahead. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. As the team dispersed, the tension in the air was palpable, yes, but laced with the unmistakable energy of a group ready to defy expectations. The sarcasm band might have clipped their wings, but humanity had always been good at finding new ways to fly. The day of the challenge arrived with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. The atmosphere in the arena was electric, a cacophony of alien spectators eager to witness the spectacle of the games. Each team, representing their respective species, was a unique blend of exotic designs and lethal intent. Jax's team stood at the start line, the puzzle run stretching out before them like a demented funhouse. The path twisted and turned, dotted with what looked like logic gates and traps that could ensnare even the sharpest minds. It was a gauntlet designed to test every facet of strategic thinking, and Jax couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. Remember, Jax said, his voice low but firm as they prepared to start. They've got rules, but we've got us. Let's show them what human creativity looks like. Creativity and a pinch of insanity, Lena quipped, settling into her position. Just the way we like it. The signal to begin blared out, a harsh note that set the whole arena into motion. Jax and his team surged forward, minds set on outmaneuvering not just their opponents, but the very rules designed to contain them. As they raced through the labyrinth of challenges, Jax felt the thrill of the hunt, the joy in the struggle against impossible odds. Each twist and turn was met with strategy and tenacity, every setback countered with ingenuity. And despite the ban on sarcasm, Jax knew that the real victory was in proving that humanity was more than just a collection of snarky remarks. They were survivors, thinkers, and yes, just a little bit crazy. And in this galaxy, that was more than enough. Even as they stumbled and fought, as minutes turned into hours, Jax could feel the tide turning. His team was working together with a seamless efficiency that defied the Council's expectations. They were proving, step by step, that sarcasm or no, humanity belonged in the games. As the final barrier loomed ahead, a monstrous puzzle that seemed impossible to crack, Jax paused, catching his breath. "All right, team," he called out, "let's finish this. We've got a galaxy to impress, and I don't know about you, but I'm not going to let them get the last laugh." With a final burst of energy, they tackled the challenge head-on, minds working in concert to unravel the mystery before them. And as the solution snapped into place, as the path cleared and the finish line came into view, Jax knew they had done it. The roar of the crowd was a distant hum in the back of his mind as he crossed the finish line with his team, victorious not just in the challenge, but in spirit. They'd shown the galaxy that humans weren't just players in the games, they were contenders, ready to fight tooth and nail for their place in the stars. And they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. The arena's atmosphere was a chaotic blend of roars, hisses, and the occasional unsettling squelch from the Boglaxians, who seemed to be enjoying the spectacle with their usual mucus-laden enthusiasm. Jax stood at the edge of the next challenge, a sprawling death trap of platforms, swinging blades, and logic puzzles designed by someone with a grudge against common sense. "Whoever built this thing," Lena said, squinting at the labyrinth, "really needs a vacation. Or a therapist." "I think what they need," Jax retorted, "is a one-way trip into a black hole." Sarah, ever the analyst, was already deep into her datapad, eyes flicking with the kind of intensity that made you wonder if she secretly enjoyed this madness. "All right, team," she announced, "it's a combination of physical challenges and mental ones. We need to coordinate our efforts without saying a word. Remember, sarcasm's banned, but there's nothing about gestures." "Great," Quill muttered, flexing his substantial biceps. "So we're basically playing intergalactic charades with a side of imminent death." Jax clapped Quill on the shoulder. "Think of it as a team-building exercise, with fatal consequences." As they strategized, they developed a series of non-verbal cues, nods and hand signals that conveyed just enough without attracting the attention of the Boglaxian guards, who were as sharp as they were hygienically challenged. It was a testament to human adaptability, or desperation, that they could communicate effectively under such restrictions. The challenge started with a siren's wail, and Jax's team sprang into action. Lena darted ahead, agile as a cat on a hot tin roof, dodging swinging blades with an ease that should have been illegal. Jax followed, relying on quick reflexes and an iron will to not get sliced into unrecognizable pieces. Sarah worked her magic, decoding alien symbols that seemed to mock their very existence. She gestured furiously, directing them through a maze of platforms that shifted with malicious intent. Left, then right, then. "Avoid the pit of despair over there," she shouted, voice carrying over the din. "How reassuring," Quill grunted, sidestepping a particularly nasty trap that looked like it wanted to hug him to death. "I was worried it wouldn't be challenging enough." "Hey," Jax called back, "if we fail, at least we won't have to hear 'I told you so' from anyone." The first major obstacle was a series of logic gates, each one more convoluted than the last. Sarah, with a look that suggested she was mentally flipping off the creator of these puzzles, tapped furiously on her datapad. "These are designed to test patience and intelligence. Survival of the smug," Lena quipped, wiping sweat from her brow. "And here I thought it was just a sadist's playground," Jax replied, rolling his eyes as he followed Sarah's lead. "All right, what's next?" They navigated through, Sarah's directions saving them from a misstep that would have dropped them into a pit filled with what looked suspiciously like space piranhas. "I hate this place," Lena mumbled, eyeing the snapping creatures below. "Think of it as motivation," Quill suggested. "Nothing like a bunch of ravenous fish to keep you on your toes." As they moved deeper into the challenge, the traps became more psychological. Holographic projections of failure taunted them, twisted images reflecting their worst fears and doubts. Jax stared down the specter of defeat, refusing to let it slow him. "Not today, hologram, I've got bigger problems." His team mirrored that defiance, pushing through the illusions with a mixture of grim determination and gallows humor. Lena, swiping a hologram of her own demise out of her way, grinned. They think this is scary? They haven't seen my last credit statement. Quill chuckled as he dismantled a trap with raw strength and a wrench he always seemed to have on hand. You should see mine. That thing's downright terrifying. Jax was impressed with how his team handled the trials. The non-verbal communication was working wonders, circumventing the ban in a way that was almost poetic in its simplicity. The challenges were tough, but humans were tougher, at least when they had a goal and a healthy dislike for authority. The arena seemed to tighten around them, the air heavy with anticipation. The final hurdle loomed large, a monstrous amalgamation of logic and brute force that had already claimed the hopes of several teams. It was a towering structure, riddled with traps and the promise of certain doom. All right, this is it, Jax said, pulling his team close. We've come this far, let's not screw it up now. Sarah, decode. Lena, Quill, be ready to act. We succeed or die trying. Probably both. No pressure, Sarah muttered, already scanning the symbols etched into the entrance of the final challenge. Her fingers danced across the datapad, deciphering the alien script with an expertise that was both impressive and slightly terrifying. Lena and Quill flanked her, ready to move as soon as the path was clear. The key to this final challenge was timing and precision, and Jax's team had honed both to a fine edge. They moved as a unit, a dance of survival that defied the chaos around them. As they approached the end, a sudden shift in the arena's layout threw a wrench into their carefully laid plans. The ground beneath them trembled, platforms shifting with a malevolent mind of their own. Jax cursed under his breath, improvising on the fly. Plan B, everyone. Just don't stop moving. It was pandemonium, a blur of motion as the team reacted with split-second decisions. Lena leapt across widening gaps, Quill used his strength to hold platforms steady for the others, and Sarah directed them with a precision that verged on supernatural. The last barrier was a brute force puzzle, a massive mechanism that required both brains and brawn. Quill took point, muscles straining as he forced the pieces into place. You know, he grunted, next time, I'm picking the vacation. Assuming there is a next time, Jax shot back, helping with what strength he could muster. The mechanism clicked into place with a satisfying thud, the final path opening before them. Exhausted but triumphant, Jax and his team crossed the finish line, cheers and boos mixing in a cacophony of alien noise. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd conquered the challenge, proving that humans were more than just sarcastic underdogs, they were contenders. As they caught their breath, Jax surveyed his team with pride. They'd adapted, overcome, and made it clear that humanity wasn't going to be silenced by a few rules. Lena clapped him on the back, a tired but genuine smile on her face. Well, Captain, what's the plan now? Jax grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. We get back out there and show this galaxy exactly what it means to be human. And maybe find a way to make sarcasm legal again. Sounds like a plan, Sarah said, pocketing her datapad. I miss being able to insult our enemies in style. With the challenge behind them, Jax's team left the arena, the weight of victory settling over them like a warm but comfortable cloak. They'd faced the worst the games had to offer and come out on top. But they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. As they returned to their quarters, Jax felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their victory was just the beginning. The games were a stage, and they were ready to steal the show, one impossible challenge at a time. As the doors slid shut behind them, the crew shared a moment of quiet camaraderie. They'd survived against the odds, and in doing so, they'd forged a bond that went beyond sarcasm and strategy. They were a team, and together, they were unstoppable. Jax knew that the road ahead was long and fraught with danger, but he also knew that with his crew by his side, there was nothing they couldn't handle. The galaxy had better watch out, because the humans were just getting started. The air in the cramped human quarters felt thicker than a Boglaxian's mucus, laden with the unspoken tension that followed their recent victory. Jax, despite riding the adrenaline high of surviving yet another round of the Galactic Games, couldn't shake the feeling that the Overlord wasn't done with him yet. The room buzzed with low conversations, punctuated by the occasional snort of laughter or derisive scoff. The humans were a resilient bunch, but even they knew a temporary reprieve when they saw one. Lena sprawled on a bunk, her expression one of feigned indifference. So, do we think Xintha's going to take this lying down, or should we brace for impact? Jax leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying to look more confident than he felt. Oh, I'm sure he's already cooking up something special. Probably with extra sadism, just for flavor. Great, Sarah murmured, not looking up from her datapad where she was, no doubt, plotting their next move. Because I was hoping for a quiet weekend of existential dread. Don't we all? Quill said, his voice a deep rumble as he stretched out, trying to make himself comfortable in a space clearly designed by someone who thought humans were half their actual size. The door slid open with a hiss, and a Boglaxian guard slithered in, leaving a trail that glistened unpleasantly under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Overlord demands your presence," it gurgled, the voice sounding like a garbage disposal choking on a spoon. "Ah, nothing like a personal invite from the Overlord himself," Jax said, pushing off the wall with a theatrical sigh. "Let's not keep our benevolent dictator waiting." The trek to the council chamber was as unpleasant as always. The corridors of Zintha's fortress were adorned with murals that depicted the Overlord's glorious conquests, none of which included a single victory involving the humans. No, their brand was more subtle. Annoying persistence. "Smile everyone," Lena whispered conspiratorially. "We don't want to disappoint the audience." The chamber doors opened, revealing the vast hall with its polished steel and alien architecture that screamed overcompensation. Overlord Zintha stood at the far end, his presence commanding despite, or perhaps because of, the fact that he looked like someone had sculpted a praying mantis out of obsidian and then taught it how to scowl. "You continue to defy expectations," Zintha said, his voice a poisonous silk threading through the air. "And yet, defiance can only carry you so far." Jax gave him his best grin, the one that usually set his high school teachers on edge. "Well, we aim to please. Or at least irritate." The Overlord's compound eyes narrowed. "Your cleverness will not save you. New measures are being implemented to ensure compliance. More like measures to ensure we don't have too much fun," Quill muttered, earning himself a warning look from Jax. Zintha gestured, and the holographic display behind him flickered to life, showing a graphic representation of the arena. "I've increased surveillance. All actions will be monitored, and penalties for infractions will be severe." "Fantastic," Lena said under her breath. "As if we weren't already living in a fishbowl." "But fear not," Zintha continued, oblivious or indifferent to the muttered sarcasm. "There are always ways to entertain yourselves." As the Overlord continued his monologue, Jax's mind drifted. He'd heard rumors of other factions within the games, alien groups who were less than thrilled with Zintha's rule. If they could form an alliance. Sarah elbowed him, bringing him back to the present just as Zintha's gaze swept over them like a searchlight. "Do you comprehend?" "Crystal clear," Jax replied, nodding as if he'd been paying attention the whole time. "Looking forward to it." Dismissed, they filed out of the chamber, the oppressive silence of the corridors wrapping around them once more. But as they walked, Jax leaned towards Sarah, keeping his voice low. "Think we can trust those rebel whispers we heard?" Sarah shrugged, eyes never leaving her datapad. "Depends. Do we have a choice?" "Not much of one," Quill answered. "But anything's better than waiting for Zintha to decide we're more useful as fertilizer." "Lovely image," Lena said with a mock shudder. "But he's right. We need allies, even if they're just as slimy as our current hosts." Back in their quarters, they strategized. The challenge was clear. Gain momentum without being crushed by the Overlord's ever-tightening grip. It was a dance of death, with Zintha leading and them trying not to trip over his oversized ego. "All right," Jax said, laying out their options. "We need to make contact. Discreetly. No need to paint targets on our backs any bigger than they already are." Sarah nodded, her fingers flying across the datapad. "I've been monitoring communications. There's chatter from a group calling themselves the Free Trading Coalition. They're not fans of Zintha, to say the least." "Sounds promising," Quill said, cracking his knuckles. "If they're willing to trade intel, we might actually stand a chance." They spent the next hour refining their plan, speaking in hushed tones even though there was no one there to overhear them. Paranoia was a survival trait in this game. As they plotted, Jax couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. It was dangerous, hope, as deadly as any weapon. But it was also the only thing that kept them moving forward. The next challenge came quicker than expected, and the arena was as welcoming as a bear trap. The new surveillance was immediately apparent, tiny drones buzzing overhead like a swarm of mechanical mosquitoes, each one transmitting their every move back to Zintha. "Well, this is cozy," Lena said, glaring up at the buzzards. "I hope they at least got our good sides." Jax smirked, adjusting his stance as they started. "Guess we'll have to give them a show, then. Let's make it a good one." The challenge was a maddening blend of physical and mental endurance, designed to test their limits and then some. Platforms shifted without warning, puzzles that seemed to mock their every attempt at reason. It was a nightmare tailor-made for Zintha's amusement. But Jax and his team had an edge. Their non-verbal communication, honed to near perfection, allowed them to navigate the chaos with remarkable efficiency. While other teams floundered, they moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, one that ran on a mixture of gallows humor and sheer stubbornness. "Left," Sarah signaled, her gestures sharp and clear. "Then up 2 levels, and mind the death trap." "Just your average Tuesday," Quill muttered as he heaved himself up onto a higher platform, narrowly avoiding what appeared to be a mechanical jaw waiting to snap him in half. Someone should really have a word with the designer. Jax laughed, more out of nerves than anything else, as he followed. Next time, we'll send him a strongly worded letter. They progressed steadily, each obstacle only reinforcing their determination. Even as the challenges became increasingly ridiculous, like the wall that shot laser beams from its eyes, because of course it did, they kept pushing forward. Then came the moment they'd been waiting for. Amidst the chaos, they found what they were looking for. A small, nondescript terminal tucked away in a corner of the arena. It was a gamble, but they hoped it would give them access to the Coalition's network. Sarah approached it cautiously, her datapad ready. "Cover me," she said, her voice a tight whisper. "Let's see if this thing's as useful as we hope." While she worked, the others formed a loose perimeter, keeping an eye on the other teams and the ever-watchful drones. It was a tense few minutes, filled with the constant, nagging fear of discovery. And then Sarah gave a small nod, her expression one of triumph. "We're in," she said, barely above a whisper. "Let's hope they're as eager to chat as we are." They finished the challenge with seconds to spare, their victory as sweet as the taste of rebellion. Back in the quarters, Sarah initiated contact with the Coalition, sending out a message that was part plea, part promise. If the Coalition was interested, they'd find a way to respond. While they waited, Jax gathered the team. "This is it. We've got one shot to make this work. If we screw it up, then we're slug food," Lena finished, her voice grim but steady. "But I'll take that over doing nothing." Quill nodded, his expression set in grim determination. "We've come this far. Might as well see it through to the end." Jax looked at each of them in turn, feeling the weight of their trust, their faith in him. "All right, let's do this. For us, for humanity, and for the chance to stick it to Zintha one more time." As they settled into an uneasy silence, Jax couldn't help but smile. They were playing a dangerous game, one that could end in fiery disaster. But for now, they had hope and a plan. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to turn the tide. In the stillness of their quarters, the only sound was the faint hum of the ship's systems, a reminder that they were far from home, adrift in a galaxy that viewed him as little more than an amusing sideshow. But they were determined to prove that humans were more than just players in someone else's game. The message would go out, their intentions laid bare. The future was uncertain, a hazy blend of peril and promise. But Jax and his team were ready to face it head-on, sarcasm and all. Because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was surviving against the odds. And this time, they intended to do it with style. In the cramped quarters, the air was thick with tension and the musty scent of recycled oxygen. Jax leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and scanned the faces of his team. The weight of their situation hung over them like a bad hangover, one only slightly less enjoyable than being set on fire. "We've got a problem," Jax announced, breaking the silence with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "No kidding," Lena shot back, her voice as dry as the dust riddling their surfaces. "We're caught between Zintha's claws and a possible alliance that could blow up in our faces." Feeling optimistic then, Jax replied, eyebrow arched. "Good to know." Sarah, who had been glued to her datapad like it was her lifeline, finally looked up. "The Coalition responded," she said, her voice taut with an edge of desperation. "They want proof we're not Zintha's spies before they'll share anything useful." "Proof?" Quill snorted, folding his burly arms with a sigh. "What do they want, my firstborn?" "Oh wait, joke's on 'em, I don't want kids." Jax rubbed his temples, feeling the headache of leadership pounding behind his eyes. "We need to give them something. Otherwise, they're just another dead end." "Aren't we full of sunshine today?" Lena quipped, her eyes darting towards the door as though expecting trouble to literally walk in. And trouble had a way of knowing just when to make its entrance. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a Boglaxian guard, or as Jax fondly thought of them, the universe's most unpleasant slugs in armor. Summoned by the Overlord, the creature droned, its voice a wet gurgle that made Jax gag. "Ah, just what I wanted," Jax muttered. A face-to-face with the galaxy's biggest ego trip. As they followed the guard, the team exchanged looks of grim resolve. Their secret communications with the Coalition were a gamble, and not everyone was convinced it was one worth making. But what choice did they have? It was either risk everything or rot in this hellhole until Zintha decided he was done toying with them. They entered the council chamber, its polished steel and alien architecture an unwelcoming sight. Overlord Zintha loomed at the far end, his expression a mix of disdain and something that might have been considered amusement if one squinted hard enough. "You humans never cease to surprise," Zintha began, his voice slithering across the room. "Though not always in the ways you intend." Jax plastered on his best smile, the kind that usually got him out of trouble, or into worse. What can I say? We're full of surprises. Zintha's compound eyes settled on him, an unnerving kaleidoscopic gaze that would make anyone else squirm. But Jax was either too stubborn or too stupid to flinch. Your attempts at forming alliances have not gone unnoticed, Zintha continued, his scowl deepening. Really? Jax feigned innocence. I thought we were just being friendly. The Overlord's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter, but sounded more like a malfunctioning blender. Such boldness could be seen as treachery. Lena stepped forward, her face a mask of calm indifference. Treachery? Us? We're just trying to survive your little game of death. My game, as you call it, is a test, Zintha replied, his voice dripping with superiority. And one you're on the verge of failing. Before Jax could respond with another snarky remark, the chamber doors swung open again, and in slithered another Boglaxian. This one was holding an object that Jax immediately recognized as Sarah's datapad, the one containing their communications with the Coalition. Sarah's face paled. How did you? Surveillance, my dear, Zintha interrupted, relishing the moment. Did you truly believe I wouldn't notice your extracurricular activities? Guess we underestimated your paranoia, Jax said, wincing internally. This was bad, very bad. Zintha waved a hand dismissively. Your resistance is commendable, albeit futile. There are consequences for such insolence. The guard stepped forward, and Jax's mind raced. They were cornered, their plans exposed like a bad poker hand. As the guard reached for him, Jax shot a glance towards his team. There was no time for goodbyes, only a shared look of defiance. You'll regret this, Jax said, his voice a low growl. We won't go quietly. Zintha's laughter echoed off the walls, a haunting melody of malice. Oh, I expect nothing less. The guard's grip was like a vice as it dragged Jax out of the chamber, the others following in similar fashion. Whatever punishment Zintha had in mind, it wouldn't be pleasant. But Jax knew he'd rather face it head-on than give up on the slimmest hope for freedom. They found themselves in another room, one less regal and more utilitarian, with drab walls and a lingering scent of despair. It was a place for punishment, devoid of the Overlord's flamboyant decor, a sign that things were about to get grim. The guards lined him up, their beady eyes reflecting a dull boredom. Clearly, torture was just another Tuesday for them. Jax steeled himself as Zintha entered, accompanied by a being who could only be described as a walking bad decision, a humanoid whose features were obscured by a hood, but whose presence screamed danger. Meet my enforcer, Zintha said, gesturing grandly. He's here to ensure you understand the error of your ways. Lena, ever the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. And here I thought we'd get a fair trial. The only fairness here is in the survival of the fittest, the enforcer replied, his voice a low rumble. Are you fit to survive? Jax met the enforcer's gaze, a steely determination in his eyes. We're not going down without a fight. The enforcer stepped closer, his hood casting shadows across his face. Then fight you shall. With that, the guards released them, and the enforcer lunged, a whirlwind of motion that left no room for hesitation. Jax barely dodged the first strike, his mind racing as he assessed their situation. They were outmatched, but desperation made for a fierce ally. Quill was the first to react, throwing himself into the fray with a roar. His size and strength gave him an advantage, but the enforcer was quick, moving with a lethal grace that left no room for error. Sarah and Lena circled, looking for an opening while Jax tried to keep the enforcer's attention on him. It was a chaotic dance, one that felt less like survival and more like delaying the inevitable. Any bright ideas? Lena shouted, sidestepping a blow that would have taken her head off. Working on it, Jax replied, ducking under another swing. Keep him busy. The enforcer seemed unfazed by their attempts, his focus unyielding. But Jax noticed something, a pattern in his movements, a split-second hesitation between attacks. With a silent signal to the others, Jax launched himself at the enforcer, drawing his attention while Sarah moved in from the side. It was a desperate gambit, but one that paid off as she managed to land a blow that sent the enforcer staggering back. Nice shot, Quill grunted, taking advantage of the opening to land a punch of his own. But the victory was short-lived. The enforcer recovered quickly, his expression inscrutable as he resumed his assault with renewed vigor. Jax felt his energy waning, the fight taking its toll. They couldn't keep this up forever, not against an opponent who seemed tireless. Then came the moment Jax had been dreading, a split second of distraction as he glanced towards Lena, and the enforcer seized it, landing a blow that sent Jax sprawling. Pain exploded through his body, but he forced himself to focus, to think. They needed a miracle, and fast. As the enforcer loomed over him, a shadow of impending doom, Jax caught sight of movement from the corner of his eye. Quill, ever the powerhouse, had found a piece of debris, a broken pipe, jagged and lethal. With a primal yell, Quill swung the makeshift weapon, catching the enforcer off guard and driving him back. It was a brutal, inelegant move, but it bought him a moment of reprieve. "Get up," Quill shouted, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. Jax scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. They needed to end this, to turn the tables before their luck ran out. The enforcer straightened, his expression one of grim determination. But Jax saw something else, a flicker of uncertainty, a hint that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he had, Jax met the enforcer's gaze, a challenge in his eyes. "You're not invincible," he said, his voice a growl. "And we're not giving up." The enforcer hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough. With a coordinated effort, the team lunged, each strike calculated, each movement a testament to their will to survive. As the battle raged on, Jax forced himself to focus, to channel every ounce of defiance into their fight. This was their darkest hour, their last stand against the overwhelming odds. But if they could hold on, if they could find a way to turn the tide, then maybe they'd have a shot at freedom. And so they fought, driven by a fierce determination that refused to be snuffed out. Because in the end, the only thing more dangerous than a cornered animal is a cornered human with nothing left to lose. The room had the atmosphere of a neglected public restroom, damp, dimly lit, and filled with a sense of hopelessness. The team stood, catching their breath, while the enforcer lay crumpled on the floor, resembling a heap of regret. "Well, that was exhilarating," Jax said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Anyone else feel like they just had a heart attack for fun?" Quill chuckled, though it sounded more like a cough. "Better than any gym membership." Sarah was tapping furiously at her datapad, her face painted with the expression of someone who'd just been told that the universe's most boring novel had a sequel. "I may have found something," she announced, her voice carrying a hint of excitement usually reserved for discovering a forgotten chocolate bar. "Please tell me it's the off switch for this nightmare," Lena said, massaging her shoulder. "I could use a nice vacation. Maybe a lava planet. Sounds relaxing right now." Jax stepped over the enforcer, who had firmly joined the ranks of the unconscious, and peered at Sarah's datapad. "What have you got?" Sarah's fingers were a blur. "I've been digging through the Overlord surveillance systems, because why not dig through the enemy's most guarded secrets when you've got some free time?" Jax interrupted, grinning. "Exactly," Sarah replied, unfazed. "And I noticed something odd. There's a blind spot in the system. A glitch, maybe, but it's there, and it's right near the arena." Lena's eyes lit up. "Are you saying we've got a way to pull one over on Mr. Galactic Games himself?" Quill smirked. "The universe's biggest sore loser isn't going to see this coming." Jax's mind raced. A glimmer of hope threaded through his thoughts, weaving a daring plan. "This floor, how big is it, Sarah? Big enough to pull off something disruptive?" Sarah nodded, her expression turning serious. "Big enough to cause a distraction. If we time it right, it could give us a chance to strike." "We need a plan," Jax said, his voice gaining urgency. "A real plan, not our usual, wing it and hope for the best, approach." "Agreed," Lena said, shaking her head dramatically. "My insurance won't cover any more spontaneous plans." Quill stretched, the motion cracking more than a few bones. "If it's near the arena, we'll need to use the grand event. Everyone's gonna be watching, and that's when we make our move," Jax said, piecing it together. "We exploit the blind spot during the event. Cause chaos. While the audience is distracted, we sabotage the arena's controls. And that buys us enough time to secure a way out," Sarah finished, a glint of determination in her eye. Lena raised her hand like a schoolgirl with a particularly stupid question. "And what happens if they catch on?" Jax shrugged. "We improvise. It's what we do best. Besides, nothing says heroic like going down in a blaze of glory." Quill snorted. "I'd prefer survive and live to gloat another day, but sure, heroic works too." With the bare bones of a plan taking shape, the team set to work. Sarah continued to pore over her datapad, adjusting their approach with each new piece of information she uncovered. Lena scavenged the room for anything that could be turned into a weapon or a tool. Quill, ever the pragmatist, focused on the mechanics. "We'll need a way to disable the surveillance long enough to make our move. I can rig something up, but it'll be tricky." "Tricky is our middle name," Jax said, clapping Quill on the back. "We've got this." "Jax," Sarah said suddenly, her gaze serious. "There's more. I found something else. The Overlord's got a failsafe. If he senses any real threat, he'll lock down the entire fortress." "Well, that's just grand," Jax muttered, rubbing his temples. "A failsafe. Because why not make our lives even more complicated?" Lena crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. "So we avoid setting off any alarms until the last possible moment. We need to be ghosts until we're ready to act." "Right," Jax said, nodding. "We ghost it. Then we punch him right in his smug mandibles." As they finalized their plan, a nervous energy buzzed through the room. It was a reckless plan, held together by sheer desperation and a collective middle finger to the odds. But if it worked, it could be their ticket out of Xintha's clutches. The day of the grand event arrived with all the fanfare of a doomed parade. The arena was a cacophony of alien voices, a sea of eyes focused on the spectacle below. The Boglaxian guards, as fragrant as ever, were stationed around the perimeter, their boredom palpable. Jax and the team slipped into the shadows, the blind spot granting him an invisibility cloak of sorts. They moved like specters, each step a careful dance of evasion and precision. "Remember, no sarcasm," Lena whispered. "We don't want to give ourselves away." Jax grinned. "I'll try my best, but no promises." Sarah led the way, her datapad guiding them through the maze of corridors. Each turn was a calculated risk, but they pressed on, driven by a shared determination. As they neared the arena's control room, Quill set to work, his hands deftly manipulating wires and circuits. "This should kill the cameras for about 5 minutes," he said, glancing up. "Long enough for us to make a mess." "Drit," Jax said, his voice steady. "Let's give them a show they won't forget." With a final twist, the control room went dark, and the surveillance screens flickered off. In the arena, the audience erupted as the lights dimmed, mistaking the technical glitch for part of the entertainment. "Showtime," Lena said, her grin feral. The team moved, their actions synchronized by necessity and trust. Jax and Lena headed for the main controls, intending to disable the arena's security systems. Sarah and Quill took the secondary route, poised to sabotage the fortress's lockdown mechanism. Time ticked by, each second a precious commodity in their gamble. Jax's heart pounded as he worked, his hands moving with a speed born of fear and adrenaline. "We've got company," Lena hissed, her gaze flicking to the door as footsteps approached. "Keep going," Jax urged, his focus unwavering. "We're almost there." The footsteps grew louder, the shadows of guards looming in the corridor. Jax's fingers flew over the controls, his mind racing against the clock. "Done," he said, a triumphant note in his voice. "Arena security's down." Lena nodded, her expression fierce. "Then let's make our exit." With their objectives complete, the team regrouped, slipping back into the shadows as chaos erupted in the arena. Alarms blared, the sound a discordant symphony that sent the audience into a frenzy. "Move," Quill shouted, his voice cutting through the din. They ran, dodging guards and weaving through the panicked crowd. The path to their escape was a treacherous one, each obstacle a potential end to their daring plan. Jax felt the burn of fatigue in his muscles, but he pushed on, his determination a relentless force. They were so close to freedom, and he refused to let it slip away. As they barreled through the final corridor, the exit loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the chaos. The Overlord's fortress was crumbling around them, a testament to their defiance. "Almost there," Sarah called, her voice tinged with exhilaration. But as they neared the exit, the doors slammed shut, the Overlord's failsafe finally triggered. "Damn it," Jax shouted, skidding to a halt. "We're not done yet," Quill growled, eyeing the control panel beside the door. Jax nodded, determination rekindled. "Let's finish this." While Quill worked to override the lock, the rest of the team prepared for what might be their final stand. The air was thick with tension, each second stretching into eternity. Finally, with a triumphant beep, the doors creaked open, revealing the path to their freedom. "Go," Jax commanded, ushering the team through. As they emerged into the open air, the fortress crumbling behind them, a sense of victory washed over them. They had defied the odds, shattered the Overlord's grip, and emerged stronger for it. Jax glanced back at the fortress, a smirk curling his lips. "Looks like we showed them, huh?" Lena laughed, the sound a release of pent-up emotion. "Yeah, we did." Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "We did what they said was impossible." Quill slung an arm around Jax's shoulder, his expression one of weary satisfaction. "And we survived." Again, as the team walked away from the ruins of their captivity, the weight of their victory settled upon them. They had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, united by their resolve, their humor, and their unyielding spirit. Jax knew their journey was far from over, but for now, they had won. And that was enough. For now, at least. The arena was a swirling chaos, like a blender set to annihilate. Jax grinned as he wiped sweat from his brow, the remnants of their little stunt still causing sparks and flickers throughout the towering stands. The Overlord's fortress had never looked less imposing, not with half its systems down and a crowd of confused spectators looking for something, or someone, to blame. "Well, that's one way to start a revolution," Quill noted, dodging a stray piece of debris that clattered to the ground in front of him. "Some people throw a party, we dismantle a tyrant's security system. Lena snorted, her eyes never leaving the pandemonium of the arena. If this doesn't make the top 10 of galactic screw-ups of the century, I don't know what will. Right above, trusting Zintha with your lunch money, Sarah deadpanned, her eyes glued to her datapad, fingers dancing over its surface. Jax, ever the cynic, relished the absurdity of their situation. Good thing Sarcasm's banned, or we'd be in real trouble, he quipped, and the team chuckled, a sound of shared madness and defiance. But humor could only carry them so far. The Boglaxian guards, who'd seemed more interested in their own aromas than security details mere hours ago, were suddenly animated, slithering with alarming speed toward the control room. Stick to the plan, Jax urged. Sabotage the arena systems, rally the audience, and then we beat a hasty retreat before the smell catches up. Quill cracked his knuckles, eyeing the controls like a well-seasoned chef would a kitchen. Time to cook up some chaos. As Quill got to work, Lena and Jax turned their attention to the arena itself. The spectators, a veritable who's who of intergalactic species, were rapidly shifting from passive observers to active participants in a brewing uprising. An unexpected boon. Looks like Zintha's little ban on sarcasm forgot to mention irony, Lena murmured, gesturing at the chaos below. Many alien factions, long chafed under Zintha's rule, were taking advantage of the confusion to stand up, metaphorically and literally. Jax nodded. People can't resist a good show, especially if they're part of it. The Overlord, perched high above in a private box like a self-important peacock, was clearly not enjoying the performance. His mandibles clicked together in a frustrated staccato, a sure sign he was losing his grip on the situation. Think he's regretting this whole Galactic Games gig? Sarah asked, not looking up from her datapad as yet another system winked out of existence. Probably wishing he'd taken up knitting instead, Jax replied. Less chance of an uprising, more chance of cozy sweaters. But the real challenge lay ahead. Their actions had sparked a rebellion, but it was a tinderbox ready to explode if they couldn't control the flames. As the arena descended into chaos, Jax's mind raced with options, all of them terrible. Time to make a speech, Quill suggested, jerking his thumb at the arena. Rally the troops and all that. Lena shook her head. Or we could just see who throws the first punch and join the winning side. Works for me. Too late for speeches, Sarah interjected, finally looking up. The crowd's already got a leader. She pointed at a towering Torgashian waving a makeshift flag, a ragged piece of cloth that, in the dim light, looked suspiciously like a pair of underpants. Well, there's a sight for sore eyes, Jax muttered, marveling at the serendipity of alien rebellion. Jax had to admit, if he'd known revolutions involved this much improvisation, he'd have signed up sooner. The Torgashian bellowed something unintelligible, probably rallying cries or a shopping list, and the crowd responded with a roar that shook the arena. That our cue? Lena asked, eyes bright with the thrill of the moment. Jax glanced around, assessing the situation. Yeah, let's make ourselves scarce before we end up the stars of a snuff holovid. The team moved swiftly, ducking and weaving through the pandemonium. The Boglaxians, bless their slimy souls, were having a hard time deciding whether to control the crowd or chase after the humans. Their indecision, combined with their questionable hygiene, was a godsend. Sarah, zipping ahead, shot a quick look back at Jax. You know this is insane, right? Insane's just another word for Tuesday, around here, Jax shot back. They reached the edge of the arena, the roar of rebellion at their backs. The exit loomed, a beacon of breathable air and freedom. But the Overlord's failsafe was still a concern, and Jax could feel the metaphorical clock ticking down to zero. Quill, think you can work your magic on this door too? Jax asked, already anticipating his response. Quill grinned, rolling up his sleeves. Piece of cake, or whatever passes for cake in this part of the galaxy. While Quill got to work, Jax turned his attention to the chaos again. The Torgashian was leading the charge, the makeshift flag flying proudly. It was a beautiful sight, if one ignored the underlying reality that this was born out of desperation more than anything else. Think Zintha saw this coming? Lena asked, sidling up next to Jax. If he did, he's got the worst poker face in the galaxy, Jax replied, watching as the Overlord gestured frantically at his guards, trying to regain control. It was almost pitiful, really. Almost. Sarah joined them, her datapad finally tucked away. Cameras are down, security is out, and the crowd's on our side, at least for now. Then let's get moving before they change their minds, Jax said. Quill gave a triumphant shout as the door's lock clicked open. All set. Let's blow this joint. They slipped through the exit, leaving the cacophony behind. The corridor beyond was a stark contrast, quiet and still, like the calm before a storm. But Jax knew better than to let his guard down. Where to now? Lena asked, her voice echoing slightly in the corridor. Out of the frying pan and into. Well, hopefully, not another frying pan, Jax said, leading the way. We get to the rendezvous point, signal the coalition, and hope they're feeling charitable. The path was a winding one, past crumbling walls and malfunctioning security panels. Evidence of their handiwork, and Xintha's crumbling empire. I have to say, I've seen cleaner escapes, Quill muttered, sidestepping a particularly large piece of debris. Yeah, but think of the stories we'll tell, Lena replied, her tone laced with sarcasm. Assuming we survive to tell them. The thought carried them forward, through the labyrinthine corridors and out into the open. A landing bay lay ahead, the dull gleam of their battered ship a welcome sight against the harsh glow of the overhead lights. Home sweet junk heap, Jax quipped as they approached. She's not much, but she's ours. Kind of like this little slice of galactic history we just carved out, Sarah added, a rare note of pride in her voice. As they boarded the ship, Jax allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. The rebellion in the arena was still raging, but they had sparked something that couldn't be easily snuffed out. Think this'll stick? Lena asked, settling into her seat with a sigh. Who knows, Jax replied, but we gave them a fighting chance. That's more than they had yesterday. Quill engaged the engines, and the ship hummed to life beneath them. Here's hoping we don't get shot down before we reach orbit. Optimism, Quill. It's a new look for you, Sarah teased, strapping in. Jax glanced at the arena one last time, the distant sound of rebellion still echoing in his ears. The Overlord might have planned for everything, but he hadn't accounted for them. For humanity's stubborn refusal to go quietly. Let's get out of here, Jax said, a smirk playing on his lips. I'm not keen on finding out what Xintha's version of a come back and chat invitation looks like. The ship lifted off, the ground falling away beneath them. The arena and its chaos became a shrinking dot, a reminder of both their success and the madness they'd left behind. As they broke through the atmosphere, Jax leaned back, letting the pull of gravity ease as he surveyed his team. Tired, bruised, but alive, and more importantly, free. Well, team, he said, allowing a rare moment of seriousness to creep into his voice. We did it, again, somehow, Sarah snorted, shaking her head. Miracles are getting pretty routine around here. Guess that makes us miracle workers, Lena chimed in, grinning. Quill chuckled, a low rumble that matched the ship's engines. Not bad for a bunch of fugitives. Jax looked out into the void, feeling a strange sense of calm in the chaos they'd left behind. The galaxy was still a mess, but for now, they'd done their part. And they'd live to fight another day, sarcasm and all. Here's to the next adventure, Jax said, lifting an imaginary glass. And to never running out of bad ideas. Cheers to that, his crew chorused, laughter mingling with the soft hum of their escape. They may not have ended Xintha's reign yet, but they'd lit the fuse. And sometimes, that was enough. Jax Verad leaned back in his chair aboard their ship, the hum of the engines a comforting reminder they were putting more space between themselves and the chaos they'd left behind. He glanced around at his crew, each absorbed in their own thoughts, or pretending to be, at least. Well, that was a load of fun, Jax quipped, breaking the silence. Nothing like inciting interstellar riots to start your day. Beats getting vaporized, Quill Thorne grunted from the pilot's seat. His massive hands danced over the controls with a grace that seemed at odds with his size. Though I'm not sure our insurance covers inciting rebellion. Good thing we don't pay for insurance, Lena added, her feet propped up on the console. Or anything else for that matter. Jax smirked. Living on the edge is free, Lena. Free like the Overlord now, I suppose, Sarah Lathra muttered, her attention divided between her datapad and the view outside. First time in a while I haven't had him breathing down our necks. Wouldn't be surprised if he still finds a way to do it, Lena countered. He's got that clingy ex vibe. Yeah, but with more mandibles and less charm, Jax said. But hey, he's out of the picture now. Or at least, he's the least of our worries at the moment. The truth was, they'd done the impossible. They'd helped topple an overlord. A feat worthy of a medal, or maybe some therapy. So, what happens next? Quill asked, steering him smoothly through the void. Do we find a nice quiet planet to lay low, or do we dive back into the chaos? Jax scratched his chin, pretending to think. Quiet planet sounds nice. Maybe something tropical with minimal death traps. Minimal death traps? Might as well ask for a unicorn, Sarah said dryly. Hey, in this galaxy, unicorns are more plausible than peace, Lena said. She sat up, stretching her arms over her head. Besides, there's still a power vacuum. Can't imagine things just settle themselves. The classic, who rules the galaxy now, problem. Always a kicker, Jax said, his tone wry. But we've done our part. Now it's time for the locals to clean up the mess. Locals being a generous term for the ragtag bunch of rebels they'd left to fend for themselves. But maybe, just maybe, they'd rise to the occasion. So, we let the chips fall where they may? Quill asked, casting a sideways glance at Jax. Pretty much. We gave them the spark, Jax replied. Now they need to keep the fire going. The truth was, they had no idea how things would shake out. Maybe the new council would be better, more inclusive, less dictatorial. Or maybe, they'd just end up with a shinier version of the same problem. But hey, at least we got out without becoming crispy critters, Jax added, trying to keep the mood light. That's a win in my book. Lena snorted. You have a funny definition of win, Jax. Comes with the territory, Jax said with a shrug. They flew on in silence for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. The galaxy was a big place, full of uncertainty and danger, but there was something exhilarating about not knowing what lay around the corner. Think the Coalition will give us a pat on the back now? Lena asked. Only if they have short memories, Sarah replied. Or long enough ones to forget all the trouble we caused. Jax chuckled. Trouble? Us? I prefer to call it creating opportunities for growth. Opportunities for someone else to clean up your mess, you mean, Sarah corrected. Semantics, Jax said, waving a dismissive hand. But maybe they'll see the value in a little chaos. Keeps things interesting. Understatement of the millennium, Quill muttered. So what's the next step, oh fearless leader? Jax considered the question. First, we check in with the Coalition. See if they're in a forgiving mood. Then maybe we find a quiet corner of the galaxy to hide in until things cool down. Sounds like a plan, Lena said, adjusting her seat. But you know we'll get bored before long. Jax grinned. That's the spirit. Besides, we're not built for boredom. We thrive on chaos. Speaking of chaos, Sarah interrupted, peering at her datapad. Looks like there's a transmission coming through. It's marked urgent. Urgent? That's never good, Jax said, straightening up. Put it through. The screen flickered to life, revealing a familiar but unexpected face. It was one of the Torgashian rebels, a little bruised but grinning widely. Jax Verad, the Torgashian began, his voice crackling over the comms. Thought you'd like to know we've begun forming a new council. Jax leaned forward, intrigued. New council, huh, and here I thought you'd just take the throne for yourself. The Torgashian laughed, a sound like gravel tumbling down a hill. Not my style. We're aiming for a round table kind of setup. No kings or overlords. Sounds like a step in the right direction, Jax said. But what's the catch? The Torgashian's grin widened. No catch. We just wanted to say thanks. You gave us the push we needed. Well, you're welcome, Jax said, trying to sound humble. But don't go naming any holidays after us just yet. Tempting, but no, the Torgashian replied with a chuckle. Just know you made a difference. We'll handle the rest. With that, the transmission ended, leaving Jax staring at the now blank screen. Well, that was unexpected, Lena commented. Maybe this chaos thing has its perks. Don't get used to it, Sarah warned. The galaxy doesn't do happy endings. Let them have their optimism, Jax said. It's rare enough as it is. So, Captain, Quill said, steering them into the next jump. Where to now? Jax leaned back, folded his arms behind his head. Wherever the stars take us, Quill. Wherever the stars take us. The ship went silent except for the gentle hum of the engines, a sound as comforting as a lullaby in the vast, unforgiving expanse of space. As they prepared for the next leg of their journey, the crew settled into their seats, letting the unknown drift over them like a blanket. Jax felt a rare sense of peace, even amidst the uncertainty. They'd managed to survive another day, and in the process, maybe they'd made the galaxy a slightly less terrible place. At least for a little while. Well, Jax said, breaking the silence once more. Here's to the next adventure. Cheers, his crew echoed, a chorus of camaraderie and defiance against the odds. As the ship leapt into hyperspace, Jax allowed himself a wry smile. They might be a band of misfits, troublemakers, and reluctant heroes, but they were his band. And together, they'd face whatever the galaxy threw their way. They were survivors, and in this universe, that was the best kind of victory anyone could hope for.